Jim has been an SEO since 1999, where he started his internet marketing company. He has spoken at over 100 conferences since 2005 in over 15 countries, all while growing the company that I actually built from one man up to 40 odd people today. Now, he says odd. I'm not going to say strange, but they definitely do embrace the weird. So he was also the owner of all the top communities that you might have thought of back between the date ranges like 2012 and 2018. So Webmaster World, SEO Chat, Creative Site Forums, ThreadWatch, a lot of them. He gives away like 100 free tools on Ninja's site, so you do have to check them out. They're free, so that's like, why wouldn't you check them out? There are a lot of snake oil salesmen in the industry. He's not one of them. We've been friends for years. We're going to be friends for many years to more. So we're going to jump into this. He gets a lot of questions every time we do this. So we got through a third of the list last time. We've had new questions come into the mix. There's 17 that we distilled this down to. So we're just going to try to get through them as many as possible. And if you have stuff that pops up in the chat, please ask it, and we'll try to throw it on for a future episode with Jim. So the first one, Jim, if you so choose your mission here, comes from Larry Bascom, and he's asking, how do you manage to stay fresh after all these years? And I assume he doesn't mean the pert.
Yeah, it's pert. Sometimes some old things were, how do I stay fresh? Watching and attending conferences like this, I guess it's trying to learn all the time. I've been doing it for years, but it's like, days like today, where I can pick up new things and learning. How do I stay fresh? I read Webmaster World, Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, follow all SEOs on Twitter. I guess it's what I do. It's what I love. It's my life. There's often people are like, hey, Jim, what are your hobbies? And it's like, well, I do SEO. I started a little bit of gardening since Corona. But how do I stay fresh? I think it's because I love it, and I'm always trying to be better and learn new things. But I don't know if I try and stay fresh. After doing it for a long time, you can't get old and stale. My fear in the back of my head is that people will look at me and be like, he's an old has-been. And that keeps me running to make sure that I'm not an old has-been, keep trying new things and learning.
Fair enough. So Sandra Newman asks, how do you explain to clients that just because a competitor is winning using like questionable strategies, that it doesn't mean that they should necessarily be followed? And how do you deal with it if Google takes a long time to catch up with their algo?
Yeah, often we'll get clients that are like, hey, competitor Bob is, doing X. It's usually like competitor Bob is buying backlinks. That's usually the big thing. And should we just go ahead and buy backlinks? And I guess the biggest question is, why hasn't Google penalized them yet? That's usually, competitor Bob is buying backlinks. He's ranking really good. Why hasn't Google hit them? Should we just buy backlinks? That's probably one of the most common things that we hear, and it's like, well, competitor X hasn't been hit. But if we look at, the search results for that phrase every single year, you're going to notice that people disappear from that, from the top 10 for a lot of those searches. And, Google does map that stuff out. There are manual penalties. If you have a ton of sites and, you got some that you want to turn and burn, hey, great, go for it, But if you have like your major brand site, you probably don't want to go down a route of getting a site penalized. Having a site penalized, if you're the head of an SEO for a company and that site is penalized, like your job's at stake, other jobs are at stake. I mean, I remember years, back in, to go back into a little bit of the history, back in 2008 and prior, we used to buy links. That's what a lot of people did. It worked great. But it's stuff that, you can't do anymore. But where was I? When a site's been hit, it's no fun. And back when we did it in 2008, Google made it real clear to us. I think it was November 16th, 2008, Google made it really clear to us, thou shalt not buy links, by taking a handful of clients and pushing them down. And, there's nothing worse than getting phone calls like, hey, Jim, how many people do I have to fire today? What do I do to get out? And it's like, going through that once was not fun, and don't ever want to go through that again. And no one wants to go through that. And it's like, do you want to, the competitors may be doing stuff that might be working and might be against the guidelines, but, I wouldn't go down that route yourself. So I guess that's what I'd tell them.
I guess along the same lines, we're talking about communication with the clients. So, you have like, how do you keep them from doing the questionable strategies? How do you reach out to those clients that are stuck in the old ways and they don't want to listen about how things have evolved and what are the new ways, catching up with them?
Yeah, I guess it's a lot of education. SEO is an interesting thing where a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous, and a lot of times people, their little bit of knowledge is links are important, and that's kind of where their knowledge ends, and they might think that all links are equal, or hey, these blog links over here are really good because like sometimes they're like, hey, I'm I don't know, I'm a finance site, and they go to some person that's offering links and they're like, oh, you've got a finance site. We have, thousands of bloggers and a few hundred are finance people, and we'll give you those links, and they look good, and they show them to their boss. They're like, hey boss, we got published on a whole bunch of financial blog sites, and they're linking to our money pages, and all that looks good. And that's where a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. And part of the knowledge that they don't know is that, all those sites are artificial. None of those sites are real. They're all linking to a bunch of other sellers. All that stuff can be mapped. So I guess it's educating people and showing them tools and results and, hey, I can map this stuff. If I can, Google can. And, I guess a lot of it is education, and we have anyone, with any of the work that we do. This probably started, I think, about 7 years ago. Like any complaints have to come to me about any of our work. The second that anyone says, oh, I've got an issue, like it has to go straight to Jim. And it used to be like years ago, someone would complain and, customer service people would be like, oh, you must be right. So sorry, we'll give you more for free. And, client retention wasn't great. And now it's often when a client complains about something, and that's not to say that it's sometimes the client is right, but the majority of the time they need more education, and they may not know why something is good or why something is bad or whatever. And often it's if anyone complains about something, it's a big long talk of education, so that they're like, okay, I get this now. I see why we're doing X, Y, and Z. And so I think a lot of it is education. It's taking them from where they're at and being like, hey, a lot of time in education, a lot of time talking to clients to bring them up to why you should do the things that you should do.
So Bill Triola has a question, and I got to read the whole thing here. What's the best way to time travel back to 1985? Or perhaps, how do you know if you've been affected by a link penalty? And what's the best way to recover from a link penalty if you've been hit by a link penalty?
Okay, let me start with the first part. 1985, the best way to get back is to get a DeLorean. I used to have one, but I don't anymore. How do you know if you've been hit by a link penalty? Well, I guess there's two kinds of penalties. There's the manual and the algorithmic. And the manual, you're going to get a message. So that's fairly clear. You go into your Google Search Console and you've got a message, and the message says you have a manual link penalty. That's easy. How do the algorithmic is trickier. It used to be when there was Penguin that there'd be certain dates of an algorithm update. And, if you were hit on, I don't know the dates, November 7th, 2015 or whatever, maybe that was Penguin 27, on that date. And if your traffic fell on that date, you're like, hey, it's a Penguin update. It's my links, and that's your issue. When Google rolled Penguin into the algorithm, it made things a lot less clear. And so how do you know if you have a link penalty? It's really, really hard. I guess the first thing is are your rankings going down? And then, is that a link penalty? Well, I don't know. It could be one of several things. How do you know if you have a link penalty? You really don't. A lot of people can lose rankings over time. It usually doesn't happen overnight. It's not like the old days where, you know, you lose traffic overnight. I think what happens now a lot is there's kind of your old score and your new score, and slowly over time you kind of move to there. It's not as much an overnight thing anymore. And so, you know, if your rankings are slowly going down over the course of 6 months, you know, after 6 months, you may be like, hey, what happened? You know, why has everything gone down? Right. And that could be several reasons. It could be, hey, you know, and I guess it depends on what it is you were doing. You know, if you were doing, you know, a whole bunch of artificial stuff, let's say a whole bunch of blog links from bloggers and networks or something, you know, some of that stuff may have counted once, and then Google maps it and suddenly there's no value. And again, you tend not to lose that overnight. It's like the gradual slow decline. So part of it could be Google's mapping stuff out and it's no longer counting. You know, I guess there's no real way to tell that you've been hit by a link penalty unless you receive that message in Search Console. Could you have been hit by a penalty? Certainly. It could be a slow decline. It could be, you know, Google has mapped out something and something that may have counted once now doesn't. You know, it could be as well that, you know, I guess the mapping out is a big part and links having different value over time. So I guess it's impossible to really tell unless you get the message. If your traffic has gone down, whether it corresponds with a core update or just happens over time, you got to look at everything now. It's not like the old days, like it was easy. You know, if you got hit on a certain date and your traffic fell a whole bunch on that certain date, you could look at the update schedule and be like, oh, it was the above the fold update. You know, we got to fix our stuff above the fold. And, you know, it's no longer like that. So it's like you got to look at everything. You know, is it the usability? Is it the content? Is it the links? Is it the internal linking structure? You know, like what could it be? And now it's kind of look at everything and improve everything. And, you know, and someone was asking me the other day about, you know, the update in May and like, hey, Jim, do you got any, you know, thoughts on that? And it's like, well, you know, there's always going to be the list of the winners and the losers, and there's always going to be chat in the forums. The forums is a little bit hard because a lot of people are like, I have one site and, you know, all my pages have less than 500 words and I was affected, so it must be you need more than 500 words. And someone else will be like, I had over 2,000. But if you read through, you can kind of find some patterns. You can look at the winners and the losers. But in the end, even knowing the winners and the losers, it's hard to find patterns in there. Everyone always tries to grab the winners and losers and be like, what are the patterns? And sometimes you can find some patterns that could be correlation or causation. But I guess the moral is you got to look at everything. You know, it's no longer a one thing that you got to look at. You got to look at every single aspect and try and optimize everything. Your links, your content, your internal linking structure, your site speed, your usability, all that jazz. I don't know if I answered the question or not, but
I think so. Over the course of that, you probably have. You know, you talk about link networks a lot and your ability to find anything in a link network. Well, Matt Harris wants to ask, how many blogs does it take to actually make a network?
well. It's kind of one of those when you see it, you know, I was doing a disavow analysis this morning, a big company, and there were 3 networks that I found. I found one of them they were all registered on the same date back in 2016. They were all on different C blocks, but the A and B block was the same. So I could tell like they're trying to hide it. You know, it's like, oh, they're smart, but you know, I found that one pattern. They were all bought on the same day. There was a couple others that I found, and how many is too much? You know, I guess it depends on your overall link picture. You know, the client that I looked at this morning, there were three kind of groups. I found a whole bunch of stuff, but in particular, there were 3 groups that I could tell, like, this is someone's PBN. And I marked all 3 groups and disavowed all the stuff from those. But in the overall picture of that client, they had links from thousands and thousands of websites. And I think one network had like 33 sites. Another one had like 50. The other one was like 40. They weren't huge. They weren't going to get the site penalized. There was 3 of them and they were small. Compared to the overall picture, it was a small piece. I didn't think the company was going to get penalized, but I marked those and disavowed them. Now, you know, you mentioned at first about, you know, link networks and how I can find them, you know, and I don't want to get anyone, or I don't want to upset anyone that might be in the room. So hopefully I won't, but you know, for the past few years, anyone that says, hey, we're selling links, or hey, we have a database, or any email that I get where someone's like, hey, you know, I've got a bunch of guest blog post stuff for sale or whatever, you know, we always write back and say, yeah, you know, we got some finance sites and some education sites and fashion, you know, whatever, you know, send us over a list. And we take those sites and we put them into our link analysis tool. So every major company and every place out there that offers links, we've kind of taken parts of their sheets and prior clients that have come to us and said, hey, before we were, you know, we have all the companies in there and we have a chunk of their links. And from that chunk, we've been able to map out their networks. So we can, based on who those sites are linking out to, we can look at the backlinks and find we basically can map out the networks. In fact, I have a tool where I can put in any of the link sellers and I can look at the top 1,000 suspected buyers. And crazy because I can put in any site and hit enter. You know, it takes a few minutes to run. You know, we grab the backlinks from Oz, Majestic, Ahrefs, and then I've got, you know, in one of my drop downs, it's for link sellers, and there's a thing of known link sellers and then suspected link sellers. The known link sellers are we have that URL in that spreadsheet. The suspected are when we mapped it out. You know, we felt these others were part of that network. So when I put a site into our tool and hit enter, you know, you can tell if someone's buying links and you can tell who they're buying from. Like it lights up, you know, like everyone is going to have links from sites that sell links. It's kind of like scrapers. Like even if a site sells links, they're going to link out to real stuff as well. They're going to have some real things going on, and everyone's going to have backlinks from sites that sell links. It's just like scrapers. You can't avoid it. But when I throw a site in and it says, all right, there's this many suspected links, and it kind of goes company by company, how many are in there. And if I see that, like, I don't know, Bob's link selling company stands out, you know, there's like 350 known links from, you know, and everything else is like 10, 12, 14. It's like, oh yeah, you know, you're definitely buying links from, you know, and I'll tell the client, hey, oh yeah, like a few years ago, yeah, we did go through them. And it's like, yeah. And I guess the thing is if I can map it, Google's mapping it. We're not only tracking all of the buyers, but we're also tracking the rankings on a monthly basis. So or not their rankings, but their SEMrush value on a monthly basis. So we can see when things were basically filtered out by Google and see people go down. It's some fun, sick stuff, but I think we're the only one out there that, you know, that put in databases of people that sell links. I mean, pretty much if you're getting links from someone that has a spreadsheet, everyone is buying off of those, and all can be mapped. And that seems to be what almost everyone is doing these days, is they're going to someone who says, you know, I've got thousands of sites in my spreadsheet, and you're a site about finance. We have a whole bunch of finance bloggers. We'll write relevant blog posts. We'll put them in there. And it's like, yeah, it can be mapped. It's not good to have.
And I know you use all this stuff for disavow files. That leads into the next one pretty well. Michael Ferrone wants to know, we have an old disavow file from 2016, and a lot of sites in there aren't even online anymore. Is there any risk to removing them from the disavow file completely? Is there any benefit to doing so?
Well, for those, I mean, it probably doesn't matter. No risk or no benefits for those particular ones. But let's talk about disavow files for a second. Chances are, if you've done a disavow file or had someone do it, in my opinion, I would revisit it. I think a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of people that do disavow files. And if you search Google for, like, you know, disavow company, you'll run across a whole bunch of them. And a lot of them are like, you know, 98% success rate, 97, a whole bunch of them. And they advertise that. And I know what it is. And that's, they're going in and they're disavowing almost everything. They go in and there's some people that are really, 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 unless they're 1,000,000% sure that's a good, honest link, they're going to disavow it. And if it ain't relevant or anything, like, there's a lot of people who are really sticky and they're just going to disavow everything, almost everything. And, you know, I'm sure they submit it to Google, and I'm sure the guy at Google or girl or whoever's looking at this disavow has got to be like going, oh, like, okay, yeah, we're going to release you from the penalty. And, you know, it's so sad that you disavowed all your links, you know, and we'll release you from the penalty. So, like, the middle client says, hey, we got got a penalty. And the client's like, oh, yeah, we got a penalty. And then, 3-6 months go by and they're like, why is our traffic continuing to go down? We got out of the penalty. It's like, well, all your backlinks were removed. And, a lot of people, when they're looking at backlinks, I think probably the biggest problem with people doing a disavow analysis is they're looking at things like Moz, Majestic, or Ahrefs numbers. And, I just read something yesterday. And you can tell it gets my blood pressure up. But someone was saying something yesterday, and they mentioned, I think it was a Moz. I forget I think it was Moz, Majestic, or Ahrefs. But I think they were like saying like anything below a Moz 30 is bad. And it was like I'm watching it and I'm just cringing. Like, no, oh my God! Like anyone using Moz, Majestic, or Ahrefs scores, thinking something's good or bad, are so far off. And I probably don't have time to continue on that ramble, but it's like, here's what Google's looking at. They're not looking at, is this Moz domain authority low? If you've got a Cub Scout website, that's all natural backlinks. Like, the Moz authority might be really low there, but, and you might have some other thing that's really high, and this site got penalized 7 years ago in Google. It's got some great Moz authority, yay, and like this site's been penalized, hasn't passed page rank in years. It's like there's all these issues, and here's what Google's looking at. There's so many people that there's so many people that do a disavow and they're looking for simple stuff, so to speak. Here's some duplicate content. Here's the Globe network, or and here's some other stuff, same IP. Yay, that's great. Google already knows about that. Like, no big deal. Like, what is Google really looking at when they're looking at, are links real or natural? They're looking at, are you in a paid link network? That's what they're looking at. Okay, are you doing something that's artificial? And how do they do that? They're mapping out your links. Okay, here's the page that are your links real or natural? And if you're in groups of other people buying links, you're not natural. But where was I? People doing disavows. So many people have done disavows where they remove stuff based on those numbers, or something saying this is toxic or this is good. And it's like, what really matters with Google is this in a paid link network? That's one of the biggest things. It's not, do you have duplicate content? It's not, are these on C? I mean, all that stuff is great and fine, but that's not what Google's looking at. They're looking at something like what I'm looking at. Are you in a paid link network? Do you need to be penalized? I forgot the question, but
fair enough.
It drives me nuts. Like yesterday, I heard that guy say a domain authority of under 30, I'm going to disavow, and I about had a heart attack. Like, no, God, I need to redo every disavow this guy's done for anyone.
Well, then let's keep your blood pressure going, because here's another one that might do it. So Carl Edwards is asking about nofollow links. Do you think nofollow links play a role in rankings? I ask this because I've seen a high correlation between top rankings and links from nofollow domains.
Short answer, no. No. I think a lot of people that looked at that, like, hey, you need X% nofollow. No followers just don't count. No biggie. Yeah, I guess that's, I get no.
Okay.
I'm a nofollow trying.
Okay. How about this one from Sarah Millett? She asks, can you talk about the upcoming and ongoing importance of mobile speed and indexing?
Well, that last talk touched on some great aspects to get your mobile speed up from Roxana. Mobile. So yeah, it's really, really important. Not just that, there's going to be that big update next year. What are trying to think what they're calling it?
They've called it a bunch of different things, and they keep moving.
Yeah, it's going to have to do with accessibility as well. A lot of that. So Google in 2021 has already announced this year that next year there's going to be a big update that has to do with mobile. There was also there was an announcement yesterday from Gary as well about anything that's on your desktop and not on mobile. What is it? March of next year, this doesn't count.
Yeah, the Core Web Vitals update.
Yeah, Core Web Vitals update. Thank you. Yeah, so that's going to play an important role. And part of that, there's different pieces of that. One of them is accessibility, which I think a lot of people don't consider. Speed, of course, is part of that as well. And first paint as well. So Yeah, it's important now, and it's going to be even more important this coming year. And interesting, I think it was just a day or two ago that, was it Gary or John Mueller mentioned that, I think it was John Mueller, that anything that's on your desktop, if it's not on the mobile, it's not going to count.
Right. If it's not set to be viewable on mobile.
Yeah, we came out with a free tool a few months ago. It's the mobile versus desktop code compare. If you search for mobile versus desktop code compare, I forget the actual name of the tool. You can find something and you just put in a URL and it fetches it desktop and it fetches it mobile, grabs the source code and looks to see if there's differences, like are there a different number of links? Is there a different amount of text on the page? It looks at some of the stuff to see if you're serving differences. Sites that are responsive, that's most of the sites, there's going to be no issue. But if your site's not responsive, that's a great tool to look at.
Makes sense. So Craig Tosconi asks, okay, this is kind of a loaded question. Can you tell us about things you've learned in the last 20 years to teach other up-and-coming SEO, CEO types lessons you've learned along the way?
I'll tell one lesson that I learned. About 7-8 years ago, we were twice the size of what we are now. We were about 100-person company. We had a bunch of all-stars. It was interesting. We had all the communities. There's a lot going on. Too much for me. But, I had the personal assistant. We had the directors in every department, and kind of anything that, if I needed something, I'd tell the assistant would tell the director would tell the head of whatever. And, things just weren't done as well. And kind of when we went back to being roughly 45 to 50 people, it was something where I knew everyone's names. I suddenly was back on the front lines with the clients. I was on the front lines with the employees. It was like, I realized that was kind of a size I could handle. We had been that size a couple times. And, once I realized that what I can handle and what our company can handle, and keeping that size has been great. I guess what I learned is for years, I wanted to be a big company. I wanted to be as big as we could be. I wanted to be that 100-person company. That was kind of my race, 100 people, filled with all-stars, and we're going to rule the world. Or that was kind of my thought for a couple of years. And that didn't work, and it humbles you. And it's like, well, instead of being that big company with that, what will make me happy? Kind of being on the front lines again would make me happy. Knowing everyone's name in the office would make me happy. Kind of staying that size. So that was, I guess, a lesson that I learned. It's not always about being the biggest. It's more about trying to be the best, rather than the biggest. And you can get too big. I realized the size that I like and don't want to get too big. But it's also, the link building or the content marketing that we do as well. It's something that it's really hard to scale. I can't double the amount of work that we do and keep it nice and clean and fresh and good. And so we cap the amount of work that we'll do, and we won't take on new clients if we don't have that opening. And so it's kind of keeping the size right. It's a lesson that I've learned throughout the years.
That's a hard lesson to learn. So, hey, I've been there. Jason Wells is asking, we're looking to invest more in how-to and DIY videos in 2021. Should we host those on YouTube and embed them into our website, or host them on our server? Any tips for video optimization?
There was just something that came out. It was on Moz from Dr. Pete yesterday or the day before. If you search for, if you go to SEO Moz, it's probably one of the top posts on there. But it had to do with, it was a study by Dr. Pete where he analyzed the search results and how many of those had YouTube videos versus other videos. Now, of course, YouTube is the one most used, so you're going to expect it to be the one showing up. But I think, not to summarize a very long article too much, but it was, in summary, it's like, yeah, it does look like Google favors YouTube for several reasons. There's things like, Google says officially, no, you can host stuff anywhere. But, they own YouTube, and how they process information could very well be, having that direct access, things like tags or speed. Speed's a big thing. YouTube is going to be faster than anywhere else because Google has the direct line to it. So Google may be like, there's really no preference, but yet load time is a factor. And because we have direct access to YouTube, it's going to load really quick, so it's kind of, so yeah, I would host things on YouTube when and where possible. But I think the other, just to throw out another YouTube tip, a lot of people, they do their YouTube videos, and how do I say, you can end your videos by pointing them to your other stuff. Most people don't even do that. They end the video and suddenly there's like a competitor thing up on the YouTube screen, and people don't know you can do more editing to it. There's, some interesting optimization with YouTube that can take place as well. So, but I guess the short answer is YouTube, even though I talked for a while on it.
Now, I was a big fan of using for a little while. YouTube had cross-domain sitemap that would work. I don't think they meant for that to work in their video sitemap. So naturally, Terry Godier and I were doing cross-site scripting to rank for Viagra in Mexico, and it worked like
Nice.
in 5 minutes. You had a bunch of stuff ranked. You're like, oh, it's great. It got shut down pretty quick. Diana Harris asks, I lost a lot of non-branded traffic after the May core algorithm update, and it hasn't improved since then. We've cleaned up tech issues. We improved our content quality, our backlinks. Everything looks clean. What else can I be doing to regain the lost traffic from this nefarious algorithm update?
Did she say they lost branded traffic?
Not non-branded traffic.
Non-branded traffic. Okay. Well, that's a really hard thing to answer without looking at everything. That's too hard to answer. I'd have to look at so many things. Feel free to send me an email. I drink black coffee at yahoo.com afterwards. I'm happy to answer it, or I'd have to look at it in order to give that answer.
Send your website, Diana, and maybe you'll get to be lucky to be his next client. From Dan, he kind of has a related question. He wanted to know what your impression of that latest Google core update was, and I know a lot of people hated it. In retrospect to what ranking signals Google will be looking at in the future.
It's similar to my answer that I gave earlier about you have to look at everything. I'm constantly asked, what about this update? What about that update? What about this other update? It's look at everything. It's look at everything. I think the thing that's more interesting to me is what Google just started yesterday, where they're grabbing snippets of sections of your web pages. I haven't dived into that, but that to me sounds that's more interesting. Anyone that's affected by any update, you pretty much got to look at everything. It's hard to be like, oh, that went away, fixture above the fold, and you're good to go. Let's look at everything. Sorry, I know it's not the best answer, but same.
That's okay. This one's a little bit more tactical. So Dave Sullivan's asking, let's say you have a couple negative review results against your brand. How do you go about removing those results, or the more likely one, pushing them to page 2?
Well, how black hat can I get in the stock? Is there anyone in Google in the audience here?
TOS is just a suggestion, baby.
Put a comment in there if you work from Google, so I'll know what to say here. So what do you, or if there's someone in Google here, it's going to be write better content and improve your reputation. So let's see. Yeah, you want to push those negative results down. So I guess there's part of it is taking inventory of everything you have. What are all the sites that you have control over? What are all the URLs you have control over? What are your social media accounts? And then kind of mapping them. All right, we want to, if we have control over this other website, we want to have a page that kind of links out to all the good stuff. And it's kind of doing the same on different properties so that you're trying to send power to the good stuff. And that's going to be the big part of it, is trying to build links to the good stuff, which will help to push the bad stuff down. There's certainly, depending on what the bad stuff is, there could be all sorts of other options. Do you file a DCMA? Do you talk to the hosting company? A lot of it depends on what it is. Can you respond to it? Can you get them to remove it? Of course, there's all the other things you want to try first. And then, all right, if that's not working, then, I guess in a nutshell, it's try and build the backlinks into the stuff that's good so that that's more powerful and moves up. It's not always a simple thing, especially if you've got a main review site with thousands of reviews on it, and it's an incredibly powerful site. That's going to be a lot harder.
Fair enough. Christine Cohan is asking, how did you grow from a small to big agency? You already talked about how you went from big to not so big. How did you go from small to big?
Well, the first 2.5 to 3 years, it was just me working out of my kitchen. How did I get from small to big? It kind of happened overnight. It was the end of 2002, and I was trying to rank for internet marketing. And this was when the company was called We Build Pages. It was before we were Internet Marketing Ninjas. And kind of one update, I was at number, I think when I started to track it, and I said, I want to rank for internet marketing. I was like 240, and then from 240, I went to 80, and from 80 to number 40. And then the next update went to number 2 for internet marketing. And it was that day that everything changed, that suddenly I had to go to I was in a room in a building where there was also a design company. I traded them some SEO for a spot to sit. And suddenly I had to hire a couple of their people from their company and start. And, it slowly grew over the years. How did I do it? I guess it was, part of a supply and demand. There were more people asking for work than I had time for. So it slowly built up. The first year, maybe it was 6. Second year, maybe 10, and 15, 20. It kind of just slowly built up. I never, at the beginning, I remember at the beginning, it was, I remember hiring my first people and thinking like, wow, I'm hiring people. Like that's scary. Like it's hard enough to worry about my own paycheck. Now I got to worry about other people's paychecks. It was a very scary moment. Hiring, like at the beginning, and growing was scary for a while. How did we grow? I guess, I wrote a lot. We had lots of free tools. I guess when I grew, it was a really fun time because we could do, it was a magical time in SEO, going back to the early 2000s where you could buy anchor text links and put people number 1 for whatever they wanted. It was a fun, magical time. And we were really good at it. And so, yeah, we grew that way. And that was a fun, magical time to grow and to make people number 1, doing things that if you did them now, you would certainly be penalized. In fact, if you did it after 2008, when Google told me in so many words, don't do that ever again. But I guess, I grew during a fun time, and, in 2008, Google came after us and said, you can't do that anymore. And that's kind of we had to reinvent the wheel. That's not an easy thing to do either. How do you grow? Well, we've had our ups and downs, and, I remember in 2003 was kind of the first time that, how do I put it mildly? Google had a talk with me. They had their second one in 2008. At that point, I'm like, okay. But, there's ups and downs, and how do you grow? Well, you get kicked down and you keep going, and perseverance and loving what you do. And I don't know. I guess that's how I grew. I had a lot of anger too the first few years, which I recently rediscovered. I had anger at a handful of things. I wanted to be able to prove myself to people. I wanted to be able to prove myself to my last bosses that didn't listen to me. I wanted to prove myself to the doubters, for the first several years. And I really haven't thought about it much until recently, but, the first several years of running a business, it was it was built on a lot of, I don't want to say anger, but it partially was, like I want to prove myself. For good or for worse, it worked. There were years where I would work. We had an office or in our office, we had a couch. It was a really comfortable couch. And I would work at the office. So I was allowed to sleep out of the office for 3 days a week. So I'd be at the office and would basically work until my eyes were so fuzzy that like I'm trying to read at 2 a.m. and it's like I can't read anymore. I have to pass out on the couch. And would pass out on the couch. And when the first employee came in the morning, that's when I got up and did that for years. And it's funny because during that time, I used to read the 4-hour work week. And I even read the updated one, twice as big. And I'm like, how do I do this? Because Christ, I'm working 80, 100 hours a week. How do I do that 4-hour work week? And it's like, it took years to realize, no, if you're an entrepreneur, there ain't no 4-hour work week. Are you kidding? Like, it's a lot of work. Like 4-hour work week, you're not going to build any business off of that. And so, I guess a lot of work, a lot of passing out at the office.
I guess I don't think it's going to be your biggest challenge, but what passing out probably wasn't your biggest challenge. But what was your biggest challenge growing IMN during that period?
Knowing how much I could handle. When you get too big and the message isn't getting around and what was the question again?
Well, it was more about like, so you talk about like how you grew. You talked about like maybe some of the internal like locus of control, the anger and stuff, like what drove you, but like what was the biggest challenge in growing? Was it like learning how to select people? Was it, just finding clients? What was the biggest challenge?
Getting the right people is certainly hard. And I don't think there's anyone out there that can be like, we know the right people to hire. I think, sometimes you might, I guess hiring is hard. I mean, the average ninja has been with us for nearly 9 years now. But you got to understand, that we've been in business for 21 years, at least 17 of that we had employees. And, for everyone that's at the company, there's a few hundred that are no longer there. Part of it is getting the right people on the bus, getting the right people on the team, finding out later where is the best position. I'm a big believer in having the right people on the team. And then over time, finding what is the best position for them, and kind of learning how much can I do. When, back in, 2013, when, we had 100 employees and 15 all-stars and 12 communities. And so like one person can't physically do that. Like everyone wants you for something. And you feel like a failure if you're not able to get back to everyone, and everyone wants your time and there's just not enough time. And learning how much I can do. And, just kind of finding out what is the right structure for the company and everyone within it. It's hard. And it was certainly challenging for many years, although I do feel like 6 years ago, everything kind of got into place, but that took 15 years to finally get everything quite in place to where it's like, this is what works best for us. It wasn't always like that.
So I guess then the final question would be, why do your employees want to work for you?
Well,
and that was a legit question.
Amazing.
I'm not putting him on the spot there.
I'm an old hippie. Before I did SEO, I was, living out of my truck, driving around the country, working in national parks, doing everything from washing dishes to room service to retail to cooking to waiting. I was just a free loving, tree hugging hippie who wasn't a big fan of society, feels and felt that money was evil and corporations are bad. And so suddenly one day I found myself like, I'm the CEO of a company and money is evil and bad. And I'm just a hippie and everyone, I guess, but I still have those values. I try and be different than other bosses. I truly love the employees. I care about them. I try and be different. I worked for a lot of people in the past, and it's funny because I watch those shows where it's like, Gordon Ramsay or the bar you guy or any of those, and they go in and they yell at people, you're terrible. And I'm like, I'm kind of not like that. Like, should I be? Because I've been there, if I'm yelling like at someone, it's a little bit different. It's kind of like, oh, Bob, I kind of expected more out of this. I thought you could do better. And then like Bob's like, I want Jim down. I'm like, oh no. I'm not that hard ass guy, but we do expect a lot.
Mentally frustrating them.
I guess it's my old hippie values. I try and be peace loving and love everyone and be true and honest and make the world a better place while we're doing it. We're not just ninjas. We're helping our community. We're helping the world. We're doing lots of donations to different places. And I try and be different than other companies. We truly care and try and keep my hippie values.
Well, we love you. And I want to thank you once again. You're our platinum sponsor for our 3 virtual summits. And, this stuff couldn't have happened if you didn't say yes.
Yes.
So thank you for saying yes.
And everyone should thank you too, because we definitely would not have been able to host 3 of them. That's for sure. So we do appreciate it immensely.
My pleasure, guys.